Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Ragnarok, a Netflix series. So, who wouldn't have thunk it? I'm actually going and consistently doing Netflix shows or movies or whichever, because most of the time I would just try to do other things. But it seems that a lot lately, Netflix has kind of been exploding with the whole Norse mythology shows and or movies because really, since Loki has come out, I guess naturally, retroactively, all the Norse mythology stuff, anything to have to do with Loki or anything whatsoever to be kind of around that kind of thing is going to probably retroactively just do well. So like if there's any interest of people like knowing about much more of other Norse mythology like stuff, go and check out a show called American Gods that has a lot of Norse mythology stuff in it. Really, it'll say that it's in stars, but I conveniently have a different way for you to be able to watch that and enjoy that and whatever without having to go into stars. So definitely check that out. But also, I guess really, I'm also doing this show also just because of that one. So it's like kind of retroactively hoping that maybe people will be consistently interested in a more Norse mythology kind of thing. Um, Plus, there was something about like this episode here that I thought was just kind of like, okay, like this episode kind of feels kind of weird to me, and I'm not quite understanding everything at first. So maybe eventually I will continue to check this show out if people are interested in me doing it, or if it just gets zero views, then I'll just like like I guess I'll watch like one episode another time whenever, and eventually if that accumulates zero views, then maybe I'll just like toss this all aside because so what is this all about? So I might be butchering some names of this show because it takes me a while to get people's names. There are some times when I will be looking at the actual IMDb or Google of something, and I will pronounce it probably ill dunly. But more than likely, since I am from a northern state called Minnesota, more than likely I might pronounce these correctly because the pronunciation might be of a northern accent. So, because I'm going to be calling Fjorn, like, just because of how it's pronounced, like how I think it should be said, like Fjorn and um, Magni. Is that, I'm probably assessing that's how it's pronounced. Uh, Saxa, Isolde, Isolde, Isolde is the blue haired girl in this episode. Yeah, I will be probably pronouncing these with a northern accent, regardless of how it's like how I assume it's pronounced. So if it's pronounced incorrectly, I could just say, well, oh wow. uh, anyways, so I'm gonna get into this. I actually thought that this like I was kind of like this episode or show kind of felt like a mystery to me. Like I was kind of like, like this episode is kind of like kind of getting you in to understand this world, but it's not actually getting into the meat and bones of what the show really is. It's kind of giving you these like hints of Norse mythology, but it's not exactly like there's going to be a build to that. More of the focus is helping you understand these people at first, and then eventually we'll get there. But it also seems like we have like a Spider-Man Tobey Maguire moment in this episode where we have Magni who is to all of a sudden kind of wake up one day and not actually need his glasses. Like, and all of a sudden, like, Magni is starting to realize that he is, like, much stronger than he is and all kinds of things. So, like, we have this, like, bizarre-ish, like, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man moment in this episode, which I thought was kind of interesting. But I, like, I don't know, there was something that I was like, well, I didn't quite like think that I got enough information about this first episode. So eventually I will probably maybe go on more if people are interested. Then yeah. So really the tee up of this episode is we're starting to get to know the people in this show. Really, we spend in this episode quite a bit of time with Magni and a girl named Isolde. Isolde, like I know that name from the movie Tristan and Isolde, like the James Franco film that I actually did really like, even though it has a kind of heartbreaking ending. Uh, but yeah, Isolde um, is a girl that is to seem to want to recycle or help the environment, and it seems that Isolde is trying to save the Earth by doing a YouTube channel to try to showcase some things are kind of going wrong in her town, and hoping that people are going to subscribe to this channel to help her cause out, which I think is kind of interesting. But also, uh, we have Magni and Loratis or Loritis, who is Magni's brother, who are to be new to town, and so really they have to kind of make friends and it seems that Magni is probably moving fairly quickly on being able to find a girl, but eventually he will find out that maybe that like immediately he'll find this girl, and then but we'll talk about it that in the show. Um, so in this show we're just starting to get to know a lot of people. There's this guy who is named Vitar. I'm hoping that's how it's pronounced. Vitar is to have a son named Fjord, and it seems that Fjord is kind of like the hotshot in his school, but eventually his father is trying to uh, kind of bring him down a peg because his good looks is only going to get him so far. And basically, everyone is saying it's like, oh, well, this guy is just getting by his good looks. Like, I bet women are throwing at him, and he's beating them off with a stick. But it doesn't show that in this episode. But still, uh, it seems like Fior is with a lot of the popular kids in school, because why wouldn't he be? Because it feels like I think he's like one of those Richie Rich kids. And so eventually we just start to see like some brewings of some people in this town, but really the focus is on Magni. And we get to find little things about him in this episode. And like, I don't know, like I thought that this, like, the little bit that they show to us in this first episode, I'm like, like, okay, like, I'm kind of like, there's some mystery of this show. There's some kind of like, I'm trying to understand this show. I'm starting to grasp it and try to like, and I actually like feel like I can grow to enjoy this show. So, if people will be interested, I will continue to review it. But I think it's about that time to go into spoiler territory because I don't want to spend about the exact number of time on the episode as reviewing the episode. So I think it's that coveted time to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time you get to spoil this episode. Check it out. If you haven't already, it's on Netflix. I guess all the Ragnarok stuff is going to get popular because of Loki, or just because it has the word Ragnarok in it. So I can't wait to just start reviewing the Thor movies because I've already reviewed Thor Ragnarok, but I haven't reviewed any of the other Thor movies, so eventually I'll probably have to get there at some point to just try to push all that out. So eventually, maybe I'll just shove Thor Ragnarok out there and just be like, like, I already reviewed Thor Ragnarok and then I reviewed it out of order, so now I have to go back and watch the other Thor movies. But anyways, I think it's that coveted time, so let's get into this. So, Magni and Loridis, hope I'm probably somehow pronouncing that name correctly. they're new to this town, and so they are to be driving in with their mother, Turid, or Turid. I'm not going to be familiar with names right away. So they're driving along, and all of a sudden they are to see some elderly man in some like scooter contraption. And so Magni is to immediately get out of the car to help this guy try to get off the road so no one will eventually run him over. And so this guy has an eye patch on his eye. And so Magni is kind of like being nice and like, hey, like, how exactly does this scooter work? Like, hey, like I'm gonna try to help you, buddy. Like, and so there is some old woman that is to appear in front of Magni and kind of like touch him on the face, and just kind of bizarrely, Magni all of a sudden has his eyes like change a certain kind of color, and it could be possible that this woman is some kind of voodoo-ish like woman and maybe casted a spell upon Ragni, or maybe she just unlocked something that was already there all along, or maybe any number of things could have happened with here. Like, I'm kind of wondering why this guy has an eye patch, because maybe he could be Odin. I don't know. Uh, but again, eventually I'll find that out as the longer that we go about this. So Magni is to go back into this car, and immediately he is to know that it's about to rain. And Magni's mother is like, I don't think it's going to rain. And so all of a sudden it starts pouring down rain, coincidentally, because pipe didn't rain. So Magni is trying to roll up his window, and he ends up accidentally breaking the thing to roll up the window. I guess proving that he's strong, but really, I'm like, how could you have easily just broken that off? Like, I guess if you were like rolling it down the wrong, you could easily broke it, but it is what it is. So so eventually they're to make their way to their new home because they're moved here to Norway, of all places, because uh, Endgame will tell you exactly where eventually Thor and all those people ended up. Norway, coincidentally. So maybe we're gonna have a Ragnarok in a Marvel Thor crossover. Maybe that's gonna happen because they're all in the same spot anyways, right? So so Magni is to go to school, and like here's where we start to find out some things about Magni. So there's this teacher that is named Eric that is to teach history, and that's the first class that they go into. And so both Magni and his brother are going to be in the same class together, but they're not going to sit together. It seems that Lourdes is to go and sit next to I think a girl named Gry, Gry, um, like Gry, and I could be wrong about that. And then Magni is to sit next to Isolde. So immediately Magni is to bust out this little trinket so that way he can it's kind of like a fidget spinner, so that way he can kind of keep his concentration, um because Magni like needs something so that way he can kind of like keep his hands busy, so that way he can concentrate in class. And so we find out that Magni is, within this episode, we find out that he's dyslexic. That there's one teacher that is to ask him what is on the board, and Magni can't exactly read it. And like there is that time where they're to mention like, yeah, he's dyslexic, so it's gonna be hard for him to read. But eventually Magni is to go and try to write a paper, and he does that by like saying all the words, and then the words kind of go onto the computer, and he can write out a paper fairly easily while talking to the computer. So, uh, so Magni eventually is to continue to talk with Isolde, like having lunch with her, and uh, like it seems like he just has like things of bread, like a loaf of bread for lunch, but like it looks like he just has like a crap ton of sandwiches or something. And so Isolde is telling like Magni, it's like, dude, you're gonna like have a heart attack with that kind of food. And so uh, and so really there's a lot of times where people are giving Isolde crap in this episode about her like wanting to recycle everything. Uh, and so like eventually like there's like one point where Magni like his laptop is kind of crapped out, so where there's like a piece that is to uh like kind of be kind of going back and forth and kind of coming off, like Azul just slaps a sticker over it to just kind of keep the thing like from moving around. And so it instantly seems like Isolde and Magni are going to be best friends just because of how much they're just sticking together. So eventually, um, Magni is to do some group projects with some students, and so Magni is to give a paper to one of her or to one of his classmates to have to read over, and it seems like this girl had liked the paper, and so I'm confused. I'm like, why is he like? I guess there's like this group project that everyone is doing together, but I'm like, why wouldn't he have handed that in to the teacher rather than handing it in to that student? Because she could have taken full advantage of this paper and, and like could have just been like, yeah, that's great, and like whatever. But I guess everybody's just really trusting of everyone. So eventually, like I'm kind of like gonna skip around through a lot of this episode, and so Magni eventually starts talking more to Isolde and sees that she has a YouTube channel, and so he watches one of the videos. And she's to mention how she had found a fish dying off to the side of the this lake, and so it seems like there's a bunch of fish that are dying. And so Isolde opens it up to start to see that like the fish kind of looks like wrong or incorrect or whatever. And so Isolde is trying to say like, "Hey, everyone, help me out to try to like stop this from happening to these fish." So, because Isolde had like cut this thing in half because it was dead already, and showcases how this fish doesn't look like the normal fish, like there's something missing or something wrong with it. So this all leads to Magni consistently having some time with Isolde, and gets to the point where he's going to her house, and we find that uh, Isolde's father is actually their history teacher, and so it's like, hey, like Eric, like Isolde's father, like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, like I'm Isolde's father, and, and so like Magni is just kind of a little confused, uh, but eventually it seems like they get to talking, and it seems that like Eric starts to like really enjoy like conversations that they're having together, and so also it seems that Magni uh, and Isolde really start to like one another, and eventually Magni is to leave because it's getting late, and he accidentally knocks over, I think, Isolde's diary, and it's to showcase that Isolde is really in love with a girl named Saxa, and so Magni's like, well, how how long have you liked this girl? And Isolde is like, well, kind of since forever. And so because eventually both Magni and Isolde eventually go hiking together because like Isolde mentions that she wants to go and put up some markers of things around these around this hiking spot so that way she can like just kind of check how things are going there. And Magni is like, hey, like I'll go with you, like I'll go and like I'll check things out. There's one spot where we are to consistently see that um, Magna's or Magna. Let's go with Magna because I'm still getting used to these characters. So Magna, even though probably it's more like Magni, but anyways, Magni. Let's go with Magni. Well, we'll find out later when eventually I watch this more the names. So Magni eventually is to have certain tools because he is to realize he wants to go and adjust his bed because he's kind of outgrown his bed, and so uh, he's using this sled as a extender of his bed, and so Loridis is giving him crap about it, like, "Oh, you're gonna use the sled?" It's like, "Well, yeah, because what else do we have?" And so bizarrely, there's these M markers on these tools, and I guess to like showcase that these like belong to them. And eventually, there is a part where Turid is going and trying to put this, I think, like fence up, and she's going and smacking this fence with a hammer, and Magni is going and wanting to help her out, and eventually he like touches his hammer, and bizarrely there's this like weird connection with him and this hammer. And towards the very end of this episode, eventually Magni has this hammer and eventually is going to do something with this hammer towards the end of this episode. So, but I'm kind of all over the place. So, Isolde and Mag go hiking, and so it seems that Magni is to not be wearing his glasses sometimes, but then other times he's to wear his glasses. His mother wants him to consistently wear his glasses, even though it seems like he doesn't need them. Uh, uh, Magni and his mother eventually go to the principal, and bizarrely, we have Magni who eventually breaks one of his kind of concentration devices that he uses, and his mother gives him another one. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. So, and eventually we see Vidaire, who is with Fior, and like telling him, it's like, well, just because you're good looking, like, doesn't mean that like you're gonna get very far with that. And so, bizarrely, we in this movie are, or in this show, are to eventually see a man, I believe, by Vidaire, who strips down naked right by the mountains where Isolde and Magni are to go on and rip the heart out of this like deer and like go and eat it and then like shout off to the rooftops like showing that he's some like monster or barbarian or whatever. And so towards the tail end of this episode, uh, Magni was to go and see this warning sign on this spot, but he couldn't read it at first, and so Isolde just reads it for him. And Magni's like, "Well, hey, like I wanted to read that sign because if anything, like I'm not going to get better if I don't try to start reading things." And so Magni is to eventually like cross this bridge anyways, even though it says warning on it. And so eventually he gets a text saying that there is a problem with their mother and that he needs to go home. So he runs off thinking there's something uh, like dangerous going on. And so Magni runs back to find out that his mother is perfectly okay, and then Larita basically Laritis pulls a prank on Magni and just says, "Oh yeah, well, like at first it was like she was just surprised about something, and then like, but she was okay." And so like Magni just starts punching Laritis, like thinking that there was a real true problem, but there really wasn't. And plus, also his phone just died at the same miraculous time. So but Magni eventually like goes outside to eventually see a parachuter, which is Isolde, make her way down this mountain to accidentally go and smack into some electrical wire where she is to get electrocuted. Magni is to run to find her, and so Magni doesn't know like what the heck to do, like CPR or anything. Like he's trying to wake her up. Uh, Vidaire jumps in the fray and starts performing CPR, but then also calls 911. And then we are to hope that Isolde is still going to be alive after this episode is over. So, after that whole situation had finished up, the real thing that we are going to see after that is all of a sudden that um, Magni is going to take this hammer that is still by the fence, go and pick it up, and then just like fling it in the air in anger, and we like see that this like hammer goes extremely far. But I'm assuming if Magni would have called it back, if it would have came back, like I'm kind of interested in seeing if that would have happened bizarrely. But anyways, so maybe saying that this is going to technically be Magni's Mjolnir, probably, but maybe not. Who cares? It's not a big thing. Uh, because I guess, assumingly, this is going to turn into a Thor show at some point. So, uh, so yeah, like, really, we're not exactly understanding what all is going on in this episode, and there's some bizarre things also going on in this episode. But really, this is all just kind of prepare us for who these people are. But eventually, we'll get further on into the mystery of what's kind of technically going on with Magni and his technical powers and all of that jazz. So, I think with that said, I kind of had covered seemingly most of this episode. There might have been some details here and there that probably slipped or whatever, but with that said, I think I'm just going to call this one a wrap. So I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.